Welcome back to Stockpot 5, Part 2. This is Stockpot number 2. Started this back in September of 2022. And what we're going to do is get a little sample of it on a piece of filter paper and test this with stannous chloride. Make sure that we have no precious metals in solution. And you can see by that test, no precious metals in this solution. The contents of this beaker is from Stockpot number 1, from the intro, part 1 video. And what we're going to do is we're going to test this now with some stannous and make sure we don't have any precious metals in that solution either. You can tell by that test, no precious metals in that solution. Now that I'm positive there's no precious metals in either one of these solutions, it's just going to be copper in solution. And what we'll do is siphon that liquid off into my waste treatment bucket that's full of angle iron, and we'll cement the copper out of these solutions onto those pieces of angle iron. These stock pots are the first step in the waste treatment process. I keep them full of copper. I add the gold refining waste to it. Any traces of precious metals cement out as a fine black powder and fall to the bottom of the stock pot. And that's the material that we'll be working with in this video series. This is my silver refining waste. It's just going to be copper in solution. All the silver and precious metals have been cemented out onto copper in that bucket. And so I'm going to add a little bit of this blue liquid to my waste treatment bucket to cement the copper out. This is the contents of Stockpot number 2. You can see there's lots of copper in there, and I need to go ahead and get that copper out of there. The black material that's clinging to the copper and settled to the bottom of the bucket, that's what we're after. That's going to contain some gold and some platinum group metals. But before I can go after those metals, what I need to do is remove all these big pieces of copper. The copper is what cements out the precious metals from the gold refining waste solutions. Here's all the big pieces of copper gone now. Let's move this copper back out of the way. I'm going to bring up the beaker that contains the contents from Stockpot number 1, and I'm going to combine the two stock pots into a single beaker so that we can move forward with the recovery of the precious metals from this black mud in both of these stock pots. Now I've got the contents of both stock pots in a single beaker. We're going to cover this up, set it back out of the way, let it settle, and we're going to put the copper back into Stockpot number 2 and put Stockpot number 2 back in service. Here's our refurbished stock pot ready for service. I'm going to go ahead and put the date on it so I can keep track of how long it's been in service, because it's easy to forget. And now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and start adding the saved up gold refining waste that I've got in my temporary waste containers. These waste solutions will contain trace amounts of platinum group metals, not enough to try to chase after it and refine it. So what we do is we pour it into the stock pot full of copper. Those traces of metals will cement out and fall to the bottom and accumulate in the stock pot. And what we have here in this beaker is 2 stock pots, a year's worth of accumulation of black platinum group metals, and this is the material that we're going to be working with in this video series. This is our main beaker with the solids in it. I've got it tilted a little bit sideways. I siphoned off most of the liquid into this separate beaker. What we're going to do now is get down in here and get the rest of this liquid off of here the best we can. Now we're going to take our black solids in this beaker, and I'm going to pour them through this strainer and try to strain out any of the copper that's still in here. I'm rinsing this with hydrochloric acid down into the strainer. Still going to be some bits of copper. Best to go ahead and try to get that out of there before we try treating these solids with any acids. Pieces are. Got all the copper out of there. I think I pretty much got this all cleaned up now. Push through the strainer. This last few bits of mud here, what I think I'll do is just, I'm going to call it now. I probably used a 1.5 liters of hydrochloric acid. Going to put this remaining solids over here. We'll add this back into the stock pot, and here's the material now that we've got all the copper strained out of it. This is stuff we'll be working with right here. Here's our material down at the bottom of this beaker. It's got hydrochloric acid sitting on it. I think what we'll do now is add some gentle heat and see what happens if we heat this material up. See if we put anything in solution. So what I'll do is I'll cover it up, and we're going to put it up on the heat. Gentle heat. I've had those solids gently boiling for about an hour. Now what we're going to try to do is pour this off into a tall form beaker so we can get the solids to settle out of here. What I'll do is cover this up, just let these solids settle out of here, and go from here. We've allowed these solids to settle for about 1.5 hours, maybe 2 hours. And so now I think what we're going to do is I'm going to reach in here with a piece of filter paper, get some of this solution on here, and we're going to test it with stannous chloride. Just see what we got going on here. Kind of hard to tell, but I don't think we have any precious metals in solution. Now what I'll do is siphon the solution out of here down into a waste beaker.
Trying to get the rest of this out of here without drawing up any of the solids. And I think we're about as close as we can get here. Here's our solids down in our beaker. That black mud is going to be our precious metals in there. I think now we'll do another hydrochloric acid boil and get a little bit more aggressive with the heat this time. Put this up on the heat now and give this a boil. This has been boiling for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Take this down off the heat now and let it sit and cool down. Let all the solids settle out of there. And then we'll go from here. This has been allowed to cool and settle completely. You can see our line of solid material down here. So now what we'll do is I'm going to siphon off this waste solution sitting on top of it. Now we'll add some more hydrochloric acid to this and do another hydrochloric acid boil. This has been on a hard rolling boil now for about an hour. I'm going to pull this down off the heat and let it cool off and settle out. This is about the 5th or 6th boil. I just pulled it off that heat and you can see I'm starting to get some clarity in the solution now. The first few boils looked like this, used motor oil, and this is looking very promising. I've allowed this to settle overnight. You can definitely see the solution is clearing up now. So I think what we'll do is I've got this set up. We're going to go ahead and siphon off this liquid. Here's our black solid material down in the beaker. It's very fine, but it's looking real clean now that we've got these hydrochloric acid boils completed. I think what I'm going to do, it's taking 2 days to get this because I got to boil it and then let it settle, boil it, let it settle, draw it off, boil it, let it settle, draw it off. So I'm going to add some more hydrochloric acid and we're going to do this final boil in plain hydrochloric acid. Set it up on the heat and just let it cook. Had this on a rolling boil for about an hour And so what we're going to do, reach over here and get this thing down off of the heat. Before I draw this solution off, let's get down in here, get a little bit on a piece of filter paper, test for precious metals with some stannous chloride. There you can see there's nothing in that waste solution. These are the tests that I did on each of these hydrochloric acid boils. You can see there's nothing in solution. A little bit of residue was on the paper on a couple of them, but there's no precious metals in solution on any of these tests. I've got 2 waste containers back here from those hydrochloric acid boils. We'll probably end up putting this stuff back in the stock pot a little at a time. Let's see what we got here. This is our material down in the bottom of our beaker. It's the black solids from the stock pot. I've got this all cleaned up with hydrochloric acid now. It's looking fairly good. I think what we'll do now is pour some distilled water in here, and we're going to give this a boil in some distilled water. We've had it on a rolling boil in distilled water for about an hour. Let's take it down, let it get cooled off. Now let it settle out. This has been allowed to settle completely. This is the water boil that we did. And that's our mixed black precious metals solids down in the bottom of that beaker. I'm really pleased with the way this has gone so far, those hydrochloric acid boils. Got it cleaned up very nicely. Over here I've got about 4.5 liters of waste solutions. What I'll probably do with this is add it back into the stock pot, just in case there's any kind of precious metals left in those solutions. According to the stannous test, there is not. So now we just got to figure out what to do from here. This will conclude part 2 of the Stock Pot 5 series of videos. Thank you for watching.